Tonight on All In.
Is the president worried after his comments this morning that Michael Cohen is going to flip?
Trump's fixer flips his priority.
I'll do anything to protect Mr. Trump.
I put family and country first.
Tonight, why Michael Cohen is publicly breaking with the president. And just how worried should Donald Trump be?
The substance of what he told ABC, if it's true, should cause the president sleepless nights.
Then, why a top Republican fundraiser suddenly ended hush payments to a Playboy model. Plus, as the president meets with potential nominees.
Would the president like to see Roe v. Wade overturned?
Why Republicans keep hiding from the abortion question. And in the wake of massive protests, new reporting on the indefinite detention plans for migrants. But All In starts right now. Family detention. Good evening from Chicago. I'm Chris Hayes. Michael Cohen sure sounds like a man who is about to flip on the president of the United States. Sitting down with ABC's George Stephanopoulos over the weekend in his first interview since being raided by the FBI 2 months ago, Cohen publicly distanced himself from the president, declaring, "My wife, my daughter, and my son have my first loyalty and always will. I put family and country first." Now, that sounds reasonable, but it is a major about-face for a man who has previously sworn undying loyalty to the president and his family. A man who said he would take a bullet for Donald Trump and has defended him through the ugliest moments of his political career.
How do you explain that there's no evidence, no video evidence for what Mr. Trump claims he saw on television? How do you explain that?
I'm not so sure that that's true, and I've worked for Mr. Trump now for a long time, and I can tell you that Mr. Trump's memory is fantastic, and I've never come across a situation where Mr. Trump has said something that's not accurate.
There are... seriously?
Yes, seriously.
ABC News also reports that Cohen's joint defense agreement with the president that allows their legal teams to share documents and information, that agreement is coming to an end as a new lawyer takes over Cohen's case. And that is exactly what Michael Flynn did last fall. His attorneys also cutting off communication with the president's attorneys. 1 week after the New York Times broke that story, Flynn pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate with the special counsel. If ABC's report is true, it does look like very bad news for the president, for whom Michael Cohen has done all kinds of, let's say, dubious work over the years. We know he brokered the president's hush money payment to Stormy Daniels right before the election. He was spearheading efforts to build a Trump Tower in Moscow throughout the campaign. And after Election Day, he courted Russian oligarch Viktor Vekselberg, whose U.S. subsidiary went on to give Cohen $1 million consulting contract, one that was hidden in a Delaware LLC we didn't know about till recently. Now, Cohen could have a lot of information to share with investigators, which might explain why the president had a bit of a public meltdown after the FBI raided Cohen's office.
So I just heard that they broke into the office of one of my personal attorneys, good man, and it's a disgraceful situation. It's a total witch hunt. I've been saying it for a long time. It's an attack on our country in a true sense. It's an attack on what we all stand for. So when I saw this and when I heard it like you did, I said that is really now in a whole new level of unfairness.
The president later tweeted, "Most people will flip if the government lets them out of trouble, even if it means lying or making up stories. Sorry, I don't see Michael doing that." Cohen's public break with his former boss comes just as the federal probe into his business dealings enters a new phase. Today, the judge that was assigned to review all the materials that were seized in that FBI raid, known as the special master, turned over to federal prosecutors everything found not to be protected by attorney-client privilege. That's the vast majority of the materials found. The grand total, 1.3 million items now in prosecutors' hands. Among those materials, according to an earlier court filing, were over a dozen pages of shredded documents which investigators had to fit back together piece by piece. And now, BuzzFeed News has obtained what it says are those recovered documents. I'm joined now by one of the reporters who managed to get those documents, Jason Leopold, senior investigative reporter for BuzzFeed News. I guess I'm not going to ask you how you got them, although that is a question I would love to know the answer to.
I'm not telling you, Chris.
Well, that's good of you to do that. What do we learn from them?
Well, you know, when Michael Cohen was raided back in April, shortly thereafter, they recovered documents from his shredder in his office, and they pieced these documents back together. There's lots of speculation at the time that perhaps there was a smoking gun in these in the documents that he shredded. What we found is basically that, you know, some of the speculation was somewhat overblown. There is a copy of a wire transfer, that was made to an account at First Republic Bank that was controlled by Michael Cohen, which had previously been reported. This kind of fits in with some of the payments that was made to Cohen by Elliot Broidy, the Republican fundraiser. This was actually back in March. And another document appears to be an insurance, a payment of some sort, or insurance documents. There's also an invitation to a dinner reception in in Miami, to Miami, Florida, to celebrate the Qatar business community. And then finally, there is a number of pages from a woman a California woman who claims that she was harassed and blackmailed by Donald Trump. Court papers, when we did some research on her, described her as a vexatious litigant who has been bombarding the federal courts with a number of different filings and lawsuits. So right now, it's kind of difficult to tell if this will be of any help or what prosecutors are interested in at this point.
So two things. One, just to be clear on the $62,500 that was a wire transfer, that we think that comes from Broidy into Cohen as payment to Cohen, or as part of the arrangement for him to then transfer it to Shira Bashar, the woman that allegedly Broidy had an affair with.
Yeah, the latter would be correct, and that's essentially what we think. We haven't been able to get an answer to that question, of course, but it does seem to fit in with that narrative that's been floating out there.
We should note, I mean, these are 13 documents, I think, that taken out of the shredder on the day that he was raided and reconstituted. There's 1.3 million documents that have been turned over.
Right.
The vast majority, I think it's 99.9%, when there was this privilege claim made by both the president and Michael Cohen, the special master said, no, this stuff isn't privileged. So federal investigators and the prosecutors got their hands on a huge trove of documents today.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a sliver of, obviously, of what they have their hands on. But these documents, the ones that were in the shredder, there was a lot of discussion revolving around it as to what did Michael Cohen shred.
Right.
And so when we took a look at this last week and started reporting on it, what we found was, some of it was previously reported on. That one document, the wire transfer to First Republic Bank, that specific document has not been revealed before. I haven't seen that out there. So that's, right. Although it's been reported, it's a confirmation of sorts. But obviously, there's a lot more out there. I think this, however, is not the smoking gun, perhaps, that people were thinking.
You did not find the "I did crimes" post-it that was scrawled and then run through a shredder.
Exactly, and to be clear, there's nothing in here that mentions Putin or collusion or anything of that sort. So, all
right, Jason Leopold, great to have you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Cohen Probe and Cohen's Public Break with the President. I'm joined by NBC News investigative reporter Tom Winter. Tom, one of the sort of precipitating incidents, it appears, in terms of the timing of all this, the end of the joint defense agreement, is a new lawyer, Guy Petrillo. He's someone who actually worked in the Southern District of New York, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. He's a very well-respected attorney, well-known in the Southern District, somebody who has a significant experience and background, both white-collar crime and just overall crime in general. So he's somebody who comes from a little bit of a smaller firm, but is somebody who's very respected. I just want to briefly touch on that report that you're referring to with ABC. This was something that was ordered by the judge. So the judge actually put the sides together, put Cohen's attorneys, the Trump organization, and Trump together on this. And the the reason why this is ending is just because the special master review of all the material that was seized in that search warrant is ending. So it's not an agreement that they had amongst themselves. It was an agreement that the judge ordered at the time. So that's why you're seeing this dissolve.
You're saying the agreement between Trump and Trump's attorneys and Michael Cohen's attorneys.
That's exactly correct. Yeah, this was something that was put together. The Judge Kimball Wood, who's overseeing the review of the material, said, hey, Michael Cohen's team, you've got to go through all this stuff and assert what's attorney-client privilege and then pass that material on to the president's attorneys as well as the Trump organization attorneys, and then they can see if they have anything that they want to add as far as material that may be attorney-client privilege, and then the special master will review it. So this was kind of a shotgun wedding, if you will, that was put together by a judge, not necessarily a formalized agreement between the three parties, although their interests to some degree are quite aligned, and certainly the president's interests and the Trump organization's interests are probably pretty much one of the same.
What is your sense of, I mean, so we've now sort of reached the end of what was this kind of judicial review, the special master going through. Right. There's nothing right now in terms of what the FBI has or the SDNY and Michael Cohen to further do, right? They just take the documents and they're going to sit with those and figure out. And Michael Cohen, what, waits by the phone or his lawyer reaches out?
Well, I think, you know, the document review is just a portion of this. So in total, it's 4 million pieces of evidence or items that they've been able to look at so far. And so the prosecutors are going to look at this. They're going to look at all the various cell phone records, see if those match to meetings, see if those match to documents. They're going to have text messages that they're going to have access to. They're using the Cellbrite software in this, Chris, which means that even if you try to delete a message on your phone, there's going to be a record of that. They're going to have a record of that and be able to look at some of that information, photographs, pictures. There's well over a dozen pieces of media here, so they're going to review that. In addition to that, they're going to be able to start to ask questions based on those pieces of evidence and those items that they've gotten out of this search warrant. So they're going to want to talk to people. At some point, presumably, they're going to want to talk to people in front of a grand jury to memorialize that testimony, to be able to get it on the record so they can start to build out and sketch out a possible indictment here. We don't know for sure that he's going to be indicted, but that would be the next steps. It's like building a house, Chris. Basically, these prosecutors and the FBI agents, they're the architects and builders. They're going to weigh the various materials that they have, concrete, roofing materials, timber, and look at this and say, okay, what do we actually have here and what can we actually build? Right. And if Michael Cohen, you know, you were talking about it before with respect to possible cooperation, if Michael Cohen comes in and says, well, I can help you build my house and I can help you build a couple other houses to put in other people or to build other cases to bring in other people to this, they've got to evaluate what he's bringing to the table. So they have to look at, okay, Michael, so what do you have to offer us? What do you have to say? And then try to corroborate any information he may bring forward, Chris. It's going to be a bit of a challenge.
All right. NBC's Tom Winter, thank you.
Thanks.
To help figure out what to make of Michael Cohen's interview, I'm joined by MSNBC legal analyst Nick Ackerman, former Watergate prosecutor, and MSNBC contributor Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney. And Joyce, let me start with you as someone who prosecuted cases, a federal prosecutor. Well, I find Cohen's behavior strange, and I'm not quite sure what to make of it. There seems like a sort of lot of dangles for the president. I want to read one section of the interview, which again wasn't on camera, which is interesting. He said, "I will not be a punching bag as part of anyone's defense strategy," he said emphatically. "I'm not a villain of the story. I'm not allow others to try to depict me that way." What do you make of Cohen's behavior here?
The entire interview done publicly on national television after announcing it on Twitter is a little bit unusual of a tactic for a potential criminal defendant. If I were a defense lawyer, which I've never been, I don't think I would advise any of my clients to do that. Prosecutors don't like to negotiate plea agreements in public. So, you know, Cohen's got Guy Petrillo, this sort of storied SDNY prosecutor, coming on board. And one assumes that if Cohen wants to talk to prosecutors in SDNY about a deal, Petrillo can just pick up the phone and do that. So it seems far more likely that Cohen is talking to that proverbial audience of one that we hear so much about, the president. And he let the president know exactly when he could turn on his TV and tune in to hear what Cohen had to say. And it looks like that last, you know, drowning man gasp, the last time your head goes above water and you say, please throw me a lifeline, Mr. President, so I don't have to flip and testify against you.
You know, this is based Michael Avenatti, who of course represents Stormy Daniels in the lawsuit against Michael Cohen. That was sort of his theory. I want to play what he had to say, and Nick, get your reaction. Take a listen.
I have to tell you, I think this interview this morning, in a big way, was a big nothing burger. You know, this is Michael Cohen trying to send a message to the president that he wants the president to pay his legal bills or he's going to flip. You know, he's playing games with the American people. If he has information that's damaging to this president, and I know for a fact that he does, then he should come forward and state it and disclose it now.
What do you think, Nick?
It's not so clear to me that he's trying to get Trump to pay his legal bills. It's also very possible that he's being harassed, he's being pressured by all the various Trump surrogates to keep his mouth shut. And maybe this is his way of saying to the president, I'm my own person, I'm going to do what I want and what's best for me. It may be a way for him to get everybody off his back. But I agree with Joyce. There is no reason for Michael Cohen to do this in public or to even be saying this. I am a defense lawyer. I would never allow my client to do this on national TV. I really don't see what the upside is here at all.
You know, I feel the same way. This whole thing has been such a strange, excruciating story in the last 2 months. I mean, just excruciating in terms of sort of watching it unfold and watching it unfold so publicly, Joyce. I mean, it's a hard thing to think of a referent for because it's played out so publicly, and it involves involves the sitting president of the United States. I've just never seen anything like this unfold in the public eye before.
I just don't think that we have, and the really bizarre nature of Cohen's relationship with Trump, this asymmetric relationship where he calls the president Mr. Trump, and Trump speaks about him as, well, you know, just one of my attorneys. There's a little bit of pathos to Cohen's position. And you know, I think that we're about to see him become the next coffee boy in the Trump administration, but the problem will be those 1.3 million documents now in the hands of SDNY prosecutors.
And also, Nick, I mean, there's just, as I follow this story, and I know you follow it very closely, there's just a bunch of factual questions I'd love the answer to, which it seems likely that the prosecutors now have an answer to. You know, did he go to Prague or did he not? As he said, he didn't go. The dossier alleged he did. What was the deal with the peace deal that he put into the hands or delivered to the White House for Michael Flynn when he was still the national security advisor on behalf of a sort of Russian-aligned Ukrainian politician? How much did they talk about the Trump Tower in Moscow through the campaign? I mean, all this stuff, presumably there are answers to, and it would be nice to know them.
Yeah, and I think that's why these documents are so important. They are also, these documents could make Michael Cohen an extremely valuable witness. The question with each of these cooperating witnesses is to the jury, are they telling the truth? I mean, you've got two of the witnesses who have clearly lied. Michael Flynn and Manafort's deputy, they both have lied to the FBI. So the question isn't going to be, did they lie before, but are they telling the truth to the jury now? And so the way that they can do it with Michael Cohen is these million-plus documents. I mean, is there information in there? Are there tapes? Are there documents that corroborate what Michael Cohen can say against various people who may very well be indicted? And that's kind of the challenge that Mueller's got right now with all of these witnesses, trying to put together a case where he can argue to the jury, you don't necessarily have to believe any one of these witnesses because you've got all of this other corroboration.
That is a great point. Nick Ackerman and Joyce Vance, thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, one of just 3 people that Michael Cohen claimed to have given legal advice to in the last year, that would be GOP fundraiser Elliot Broidy, is now ending hush money payments to a former Playboy model. The bizarre, always bizarre details of that story in 2 minutes.
Thanks for the ride along, Captain.
About a prominent Republican making hush money payments to an adult performer has just gotten even weirder. And no, it's not the one you're thinking of. Back in April, the Wall Street Journal reported that this guy, Elliot Broidy, who was at the time the deputy finance chair of the RNC, had agreed in late 2017 to pay $1.6 million, not a small amount of money, to a former Playboy playmate named Shira Bashar. In a statement, Brody said, "I acknowledge I had a consensual relationship with a Playboy playmate. At the end of our relationship, this woman shared with me that she was pregnant. She alone decided she didn't want to continue with the pregnancy, and I offered to help her financially during this difficult period." Now, more on that strange statement in a moment. Brody stepped down from his post at the RNC. The story did not go away, in large part because there are some striking similarities between the story of Elliot Brody's hush money agreement with the Playboy playmate, in his own words, and Donald Trump's hush money agreement with the adult film actress Stormy Daniels, especially since they were both negotiated by Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, who, get this, even used the exact same template in both agreements. Also, both women happen to have been represented by the same lawyer, Keith Davidson, which is also extremely weird. The similarities prompted a lot of speculation about what was really going on here, and now there's a new twist. The Wall Street Journal reported yesterday that Brody has decided to stop the hush money payments after only 2 of a promised 8 installments of $200,000 each. Joining me now to explain what is going on with Brody is the co-author of that story, Wall Street Journal investigative reporter Michael Rothfeld. All right, Michael, why is Elliot Brody stopping his payments to Shira Bashard?
Well, basically because the agreement has become public and he believes that someone on her side breached the agreement. He's said that Keith Davidson, who represented her in the deal you just alluded to, told Michael Avenatti, the current lawyer for Stormy Daniels, about this deal. Avenatti tweeted an allusion to the agreement the night before we reported it in April, and Brody now says he has information that Davidson breached it, which Davidson denies, but he's saying since someone breached it, I don't have to pay anymore. He's paid $400,000 so far out of the $1.6 million, but he did not make the payment that was due yesterday.
All right, so presumably this will now go to court, right?
It remains to be seen. It's possible that, they could try to work something out. She has new attorneys, and so she could theoretically sue Brody. She could try to sue Keith Davidson if she believes he breached it. So, it should be interesting because if she does sue him, we will presumably learn more about what happened, how this all went down, and, I guess if we want to, about their relationship.
Well, okay, so I should say that a spokesman for Davidson, said the lawyer hasn't breached any agreement.
Right.
Any accusation to the contrary is false and defamatory, said his spokesperson. But I want to let me ask you this: how confident are you that Elliot Brody had a sexual relationship with the woman in question, Shira Bashard?
I'm very confident that they have an agreement. If you're asking me if Donald Trump had a sexual relationship with Shira Bashard, I'm quite confident that did not happen. And I believe that, the agreement was between Brody and her, and that they were the ones who had the alleged relationship, or not having been there. Obviously, I can't say, what happened in their bed, but, there's absolutely no facts to suggest otherwise. We've reported it from all sides. There's no one, not one bit of information that we've found that would suggest that anyone other than Elliot Brody was involved in this relationship.
Do you have a good theory for Michael Cohen's involvement in this? I mean, I guess were they just knew each other from being both deputy finance chairs of the RNC, and he was like, hey, I've got a Playboy playmate situation I need you to help me with?
Yeah, basically. Well, so Davidson and Cohen had worked together on the Stormy Daniels agreement. And they also dealt with each other on the Karen McDougal agreement. She was the playmate who had a $150,000 hush payment from the parent of the National Enquirer. That was both in 2016. So when Bashard came to Davidson, he called Cohen because he knew Cohen might know Brody, and Cohen's like, yeah, I know him. And as we reported, Cohen called up Brody and said, hey, it's your lucky day. You have a big problem. There's a former playmate who says you got her pregnant, and I can help you fix it. So that's how it went down. Cohen was paid $250,000, and you were asking an earlier guest about the $62,000 $500 payment. That was a quarter of Cohen's fee that went to him. The $200,000 payments were eight installments that were paid to Bashard.
So he's now cutting off payment. Shira Bashard has gotten a new lawyer. Keith Davidson has been sued by one of his former clients in Stormy Daniels for his representation. And presumably, I mean, maybe Shira Bashard will just walk away from $1.2 million, but that seems unlikely.
Yeah.
It seems likely that we're going to see this and also ending up in court fairly soon.
Yeah, unless they say they negotiate some kind of a settlement, and if she doesn't think she has a good case, maybe she and Brody could settle for half of it, maybe $600,000. I mean, just pure speculation, but you know, it's quite likely that this will end up in court.
I will say, you mentioned Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, two other people who had NDAs negotiated, right. in part at least by Michael Cohen, that Shira Bashard is someone a lot of people want to talk to on the record. She is locked under an NDA, but presumably if Broidy's walking away from that, she would be able to tell her story.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know what legal advice for lawyers will give her, but she certainly may have a lot more information she could talk about relating to Elliot Broidy and their relationship, and could also settle some of the speculation that you might be talking about, that you were talking about earlier.
Well, I just want to know the truth, that's all. Michael Rothfeld, thanks for being with me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Ahead, the key senators refusing to give a straight answer on Roe v. Wade, why Republicans continue to try and dodge the central abortion question ahead of the president's nomination of a Supreme Court justice. Next.
This is